What's up? How you doing, guys? Welcome to another episode of the IMO podcast. I'm your host, Book is Zygotic Glove Puppet. So today we're going to talk about technology, I guess. The other day I was watching a movie called Outside the Wire. There's an actor called Anthony, and I think the main actor was actually Damson Idris, and well, I guess they were both the main actors, Anthony Mack and Damson Idris. I think that's what they're called. Anthony also acted in another movie called Altered Carbon. I highly recommend you go watch those movies. Very, very, very amazing movies. I think Altered Carbon was about something about immortality. I think human beings had figured out how to continue living for years and years and years and years to come. I think they would change their bodies, their skins. Anyway, Altered Carbon, Outside the Wire, great movies. But today we're going to focus on Outside the Wire. So you can find Outside the Wire on Netflix. Highly recommend you go and watch it. Yeah, so this movie is a movie about, spoiler alert, it's a movie about, I guess, a military soldier who is a drone fighter who does something that leads him to another, I guess you could say, another division of the military, where he meets this, I don't know if he's a lieutenant or whatever. So Anthony's the guy who he moves over to work with, and so he meets Anthony, and they immediately start going out on missions and whatnot. Anyway, so what ends up happening is that I'm trying to see how I can tell you about this without spoiling the movie too much for you. So Anthony is an artificial intelligence. He's a machine. That's something they're going to let you know as soon as the two of them meet. So it's nothing crazy. It's not like I've spoiled too much by telling you that. So Anthony is a machine, and Idris is a human being, a young guy who has been transferred to Anthony's, I guess you could say, squad. It's not really a squad. To whatever he's sent to work with Anthony. Yeah, so it's just the two of them. This movie is wild, man. It's really done well, because Anthony, he's some 5th generation combat machine, and it's so the way the movie is shot, it's Anthony who is acting, but they give you these scenes where you can see that he's a machine, and so it's really fucked up, because what I loved about this movie was that it was a movie about robots, and Anthony had a personality. This robot had a personality. It really they did a very good job at showing us what it would be like, showing us what machines of the future would be like, and how confusing it could be to be around really highly evolved machines. And so Anthony ends up being Damson's superior, and he's basically, so they meet up, they're talking about all sorts of things, and initially Damson has no idea that Anthony is a machine, and so they're just kind of going back and forth until Anthony shows him that he is a machine, and Damson just freaks out because he wasn't able to spot that. And of course he was a drone pilot, right? So he's like a techie, and he's like, how the hell did I not see this, right? How the hell did I not sense that this is not a human being? For me, what really jazzed me about this movie was, I guess, the psychology behind this machine and its relationship with Damson. This thing had a personality, and you could see that Damson liked it. There were moments where Damson really liked this machine, but they're the soldiers, so they're out at war, and there were moments where this guy is really sharp. Damson is really sharp, so there were moments where he would remember that this is AI, this is a machine, and you could see him question himself, like, how much is this thing, how much control do I have of what's happening right now? How much control do I have over the situation that I'm getting myself into? Because the machine has a personality at this point, and it's charming, and it's cracking jokes. It's and you can see that Damson likes it, and as he's superior, the machine is his superior. He kind of has to follow orders, and so he's caught in this weird situation where he has a superior that's a machine that's telling him what to do, but he has these moments where he questions the machine's humanity, and he questions if this is a good idea. Because see, if it's a machine and it's gone AWOL, and he's being deceived by a machine that's gone AWOL, they could do some real damage. And so this movie, Outside the Wire, man, it's really amazing. You really need to go check it out if you haven't seen it. Yeah, so for me, what is really unique about this whole thing is the psychology of it, the psychology between man and machine. And the reason I also brought up Altered Carbon is because Altered Carbon also touches on something else. You see, Outside the Wire is about man interacting with machine. Altered Carbon is more about, it's got a cyberpunkish vibe to it, where man becomes machine. Okay, so those two things are things that I want to talk about today. And so man interacting with machine and man becoming machine, I feel like man interacting with machine is a lot closer than man becoming machine, although with Elon Musk and his Neuralink and all these things, maybe man becoming machine isn't too far away. But see, there's been a lot of conversations about artificial intelligence and how much it's developing and where it's going. And the thing is, with Outside the Wire, it's very obvious that you see, there was another entity out there that you could be aware of. You could be conscious, you could try to be conscious of the fact that this is an AI and I need to be on guard about what the hell is happening here. But the funny thing is that human beings today are pretty much in that same situation that Idris was in. Because with our phones and with our computers and with our TVs and with there's so much technology around us all the time, and we always assume that because we built it, we are in control of what's going on. How the hell could a machine influence me? And so maybe like our phones of course are not like 5th generation military soldiers, but I can see the relationship, I can see the similarity between that movie Outside the Wire and like the reality of modern day people and the relationships we have with our own technologies. The psychology behind it, for me, the psychology of human and machine interaction is very fascinating. Okay, so like, let's say like your phone, right, and all your social media platforms and your apps and all that stuff, there's a lot of programming and algorithms that have been included in this technology. And this technology is not just meant to make your life easier, it's also meant to, it's also, how do I say this, it's also meant, it's not just you who is benefiting from this technology, there's other companies that are benefiting from this technology. And so we always assume that we are in control because it's mine. So I always wonder, like, how often do we think about how our technology influences us? Like the way Anthony was influencing Idris. he really did get this boy from one place to another and got him into some shit that he had very little control over, only until the end when he figured out what was happening and, made a stand and said, no, we can't do this. So with today's technology, I feel like for the most part, most of us aren't awake, aren't even conscious about our relationship with technology. We always assume that our devices and our technology, we are the ones influencing. Many of us assume it's a one-way street. It's us to it. We are using it. We never really think of it as an interaction. We never really think of our phones as something that's alive. Maybe not in the sense that we are alive, but in the sense that it's a system of its own, and it's not the what we and our technology have is a relationship. It's not a one-way street. The phone influences us and we influence the phone. Our technology influences us just as much as we interact with it. And some of our technology is so charming, we completely forget that we could lose control of the situation. And that's a bit of a scary thought for me, because I wonder what that would mean moving forward. It's like, are we going to create situations where we have new, is the word diseases or new psychological problems? Like there's this game called Cyberpunk, and in the game Cyberpunk, we talk about like cyber psychosis. There are ailments called cyber psychosis. I know it's slightly different, but right now cyber psychosis is not actually a thing, because human beings aren't putting technology into their bodies yet. But somewhere in the future, I can see cyber psychosis being a thing. And just to use that as a reference, I would say that cyber psychosis is in its infancy right now. I would say cyber psychosis is in its infancy right now. I think it's actually a thing right now. We just don't know how to identify it and how to classify it as it is right now. So for an example, if you go on social media and you have your Twitter accounts and you have all the social media, and you have the lefts and the rights, and you have people who are online having arguments with other people around the world, and they're taking in this information from people they don't agree with or whatever, and people can actually become sick and go mad just from interacting with their social media. People can actually kill themselves from interacting with their technology. People can actually go out and carry out mass shootings, or go out and create and start riots and burn down cities because of their interaction with their technology and their social media. And that's what I was saying, that we forget that it's a relationship with our technology. And especially like now, because nowadays kids are getting phones very young, so our development as human beings, it's really heavily influenced by technology, especially these days. And so our development as human beings is being influenced by the technology for the most part. And for those of us who are much older, the changes to our personalities and the changes to who we are is also being influenced by the technology. Now, I'm not going to even try to say that, oh, we should ban technology. That's not where I'm going with this. I know that's not how evolution works. My goal here was to identify a phenomenon that perhaps not many people are aware of, or perhaps that many people don't pay attention to. And maybe, and you see, you identify a problem and then you say, okay, this could be a problem, what do we do about it next? But if we don't even identify the problem, we can't do anything about it. And so I'm not going to try and say, oh, we can't roll back technology. The technology is there, it's there to stay. But with all the madness that's going on in the world today, perhaps this has something to do with it, some kind of cyber psychosis. Perhaps that does really play a big influence in the way the world is unfolding today. Because I mean, even the Chinese know this. The Chinese don't really have many restrictions for TikTok outside the country, but within the country they have very strict laws about what kind of content is allowed on TikTok and how much time the children are allowed to interact with TikTok and what kind of content they're allowed to interact with. They know this, that human beings and technology have a relationship. It's a two-way street. The technology can influence the human beings just as much as they interact with it. Technology can be very enchanting, it can be very charming, it can be very seductive, and can be very easy to get lost in its marvel. Like outside the wire, when Anthony really had a personality, and he would, you could see, you know how they say you've got to pass a Turing test. If I would say there was a psychological Turing test, man, he aced that shit. There were times I would be watching the movie and I'd get goosebumps, because I could see what this storyteller was trying to communicate with us. Whoever wrote the story, or whoever directed the story, they really did a good job at conveying whatever message they had. I think there were two messages. The one was about machines in modern warfare, but there was also another, I personally feel like there's another message below that about how good the technology is going to get, to the point that we won't be able to differentiate between machine and human. And that could be a scary thing, because machines and human beings aren't really the same thing. There's also been discussions about how human beings could create machines that are so superior to us that they destroy us, like we are destroyed by our own creation, because technology evolves so fast that it could evolve to the point where it's 1,000 years more advanced than human beings. It becomes a super intelligence, and it becomes so powerful, it becomes like, it creates a situation where technology and human beings are like what human beings and, let's say, fleas are. How the difference in evolution between human beings and fleas will be the same as the difference in evolution between machines and human beings, with machines being the superior, I guess, being. Imagine a situation like that. And so, because once machines know how to evolve, they can just evolve exponentially, and they can do it on their own, and they can do it much faster than human beings. So it's not something that's out of there, like that's not something that's crazy to imagine. If ever human beings create, in fact, if ever human beings create a robot like if you've watched iRobot, I hope, if you've never watched iRobot with Will Smith, I highly recommend you go check that out. Like robots like the Tesla robot, and you have all you program the machines, and you create a machine that can create another machine on its own, right? Self-producing machines. And you create a robot that has learning mechanisms. A robot could evolve 1,000 years if it's done right, it could evolve 1,000 years in one person's lifetime, or even in less time than that. And so the question is always, what would they do to us? Like, what would be the chance of human beings with flesh and bones and nerves? What would be the chance of us remaining here, remaining alive? Would we be taken out? Would we become so insignificant that the robots built over us? I don't know. These are interesting questions. That's a sidetrack. I guess human beings are not aware. Human beings don't think of technology as something that's alive yet. And I always tell people, like the internet, it's an alien life form that has I guess you could say, a symbiotic relationship with human beings, but human beings don't know that it's here. It's like if there was a ghost if there was a ghost in your life, and somehow it made life easier for you, right? So maybe if you made a mess somewhere, it would pick up and clean up for you. So you kind of benefit from that ghost being there, but you I guess you don't really know it's there. You kind of know that there's something here that's making life easier for you, but you don't know what it is. So the internet is like an alien life form, and even human beings don't think of it as that. They just think of it as this thing that we created and that we use. They think of machines and the internet and all these things as utility things, or like the way you think of a broom. We use the broom to sweep up things, and then you put it away, not realizing that these things are things that are evolving, and we forget that it's a relationship we have with these things. And so if you had a relationship with somebody, what kind of people you would try to make sure you have healthy relationships with people, right? You wouldn't just go around having relationships with just anybody. You would try to put boundaries around the people you have relationships with. But for some reason, human beings, I don't think many of us create boundaries with the technology we have in our lives, because we don't think of it as a relationship. And I worry that if we're not aware of that, the next generation is even less aware of it, and the generation of that is even less aware of it, to the point that we forget something about how we used to be before the technology. And I wonder if we would lose a part of ourselves getting lost in this relationship we have with the technology. The technology will become the dominant thing in the relationship, rather than it being an equal and balanced relationship. It's very fascinating. Like I said, the psychology behind that movie was mad, man. It touched me in so many places. It brought up a lot of thoughts, and I just said, we should really be aware of this. And like I said, I'm not trying to fight this, because if you've ever heard of Dan Brown, I think Dan Brown wrote a book called Origins, I think. And in the book Origins, towards the end of the book, he through the book he tries to discuss where humans came from, but towards the end of the book, I think he discusses where we are going. And one of the things that is discussed in the book is the fact that the next stage in evolution for humankind is the merging of human and machine to become one. And I really believe that. So I really do believe that this humans and technology, we can't really run away from each other. However, I really think we need to be aware. We really need to be more aware of the fact that this is a relationship with technology, and I think it would be better if we had more control of the kind of relationship we have with it. Yeah. So I think that's it for me for today. Check you guys out on the next podcast. Goodbye.